of the minors in line with the South African laws and international child protection protocols.
The US has suspended all assistance to the government of Somalia, alleging that officials destroyed an UN World Food Programme warehouse, which has long been battling Al-Qaeda-linked Islamist militants as it tries to rebuild the country after a devastating civil war and years of drought. It has yet to comment, though, although the US has withdrawn from several UN organizations under President Donald Trump. It remains by far the largest contributor to the WFP, paying $2 billion in 2025, almost a third of its total funding. The main opposition candidate in Uganda's presidential election next week has called for a freeze on international financial aid to President Yoweri Museveni's government. Bobby Wine says foreign support is sustaining a crackdown on opposition supporters ahead of the polls due to take place on the 15th of this month. He alleges that he has been assaulted by security forces while hundreds of his supporters have been detained during the election campaign.
Western countries have laws that they can evoke to slap sanctions on those that violate human rights, those that undermine democracy and the rule of law. Unfortunately, they've not. So that comes off as if diplomacy is more important than democracy to them.
Further afield, the United Nations is being forced to improve efficiency and cut costs amid a cash crisis and will cut a quarter of peacekeepers in 9 operations around the world in the coming months due to a lack of money. UN senior officials on the 8th of October last year said the future funding from the United States remains uncertain. Washington is the UN's largest peacekeeping contributor, accounting for more than 26% of funding, followed by China, which pays nearly 24%. US President Donald Trump in August unilaterally cancelled some $800 million in peacekeeping funding appropriated for 2024 and 2025.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a statement that the withdrawal was part of a process to identify wasteful, ineffective and harmful international organizations, with the Trump administration finding them to be redundant in scope, mismanaged, unnecessary, or captured by the interests of actors advancing their own agendas. Rubio said the organizations they were leaving were often dominated by progressive ideologies and detached from U.S. national interests, citing gender equity, climate orthodoxy, and DEI mandates.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
Journalist Accreditation Board, JAB, in Tanzania says about 4,000 journalists have registered to get licenses. The East African nation this week announced plans to crack down on journalists and media outlets operating without accreditation. The JAB says it has learned of a growing number could lead to targeting outlets critical of government. Moving on now, let's go to this story. Climate change activists have reacted with shock to the United States withdrawal from dozens of international and United Nations entities, claiming that the treaties operate contrary to Washington's national interests. The decision by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration will affect 35 non-UN groups as well as 31 UN entities, including a crucial climate treaty and UN body promoting gender equality and women's empowerment. This comes after the US was notably absent from last year's annual UN International Climate Summit. For more on this, we are joined on the line by international relations analyst and director of Africa-Asia Dialogues, Tsepiso Makwetla. A very good evening to you and compliments of the season to you, Tsepiso.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just first start with this UN decision. How will its exit from 66 organizations accelerate the shift towards a multipolar world order, which some nations are most likely to fill the resulting leadership vacuum?
Well, Trump is insistent and is serious about destroying multilateralism in the world, and this is another step towards that. If you look at the list of the UN agencies that is the United States going to be withdrawing or cancelling its support and funding, that includes UN Women, which has been doing a lot of good work in terms of promoting the rights of women around the world and gender justice. And now we find ourselves in a situation where these organizations and agencies have to start searching for alternative funding. And the only alternative funding that has been available has been with the European countries, which are also not really keen at meeting their own obligations. So we're in a very, very serious situation in terms of international relations and global politics. And I think when the dust settles, that is 3 years from now, the world will be in a much, much more dire situation in terms of democracy, in terms of promotion of all these liberties that were enjoyed at least before 2016 when Donald Trump started his first tenure as the President of the United States.
And just from a policy rationale and strategic intent point of view, just your thoughts on the core reasoning that has been articulated behind the U.S. decision to withdraw from organizations, as you say, like UN Women, which has indeed done a lot of good, and the UN FCCC and dozens other international organizations. How does the administration really define U.S. national interests from what it said?
Well, we can only quote what Marco Rubio said, which is these are organizations that are not yielding any benefit to the United States and their interests. In other words, in terms of their cost-cutting strategy, which was started by Elon Musk, by the way, if you still remember. This is a continuation of that. They don't need these organizations to be part and parcel of their own strategies towards the promotion of their own national interest, number one. Number two is, of course, they just want to destroy multilateralism, as I've already said. They just not caring no more. And they're showing the entire world who's the boss. It's a new world of imperialism led by Donald Trump, and he's going to destroy whatever it is that seeks to push back on anything that he's trying to do in terms of pushing his imperialistic agenda, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, as was already said. And I think these organizations are the first victims of that strategy. And I think there's much more to come. We don't know what's next. But with him also flexing his muscle, United States' muscle against Greenland, we might just have NATO also falling into this strategy that is embraced by Trump and is already threatening to do so. So we're in trying times in terms of international politics, and unfortunately, we don't see all of these other major powers coming in and filling the void, nor pushing back at what Donald Trump is trying to do.
And I think for me, the most important thing is beyond international politics, it's also around national policy. I mean, we've seen how the US has been moving on reproductive health, the domestic policies that it has inculcated, but it also speaks volumes just with regards to renewable energy transition. I mean, the question really is the US accepting the scientific basis for climate action?
Well, they're not, and this is a position of Donald Trump. The fact that they are now quoting all these oil-rich countries, that's a pushback on the intentions, at least those that were embraced by Paris Accord, of cutting or reducing the utilization of fossil fuels. What we see happening at the moment, whether it's Venezuela, Angola, Nigeria, what you see Donald Trump, affirming his position in terms of going back into using the fossil fuels, and he's going to do whatever it takes to ensure that not only is he going to be quoting those countries that continue to supply oil to the world, and by the way, strangely, we haven't had much from the Arab countries who are going to be benefiting from Donald Trump's new policy on fossil fuels. One would have expected them to issue at least statements against what happened in Venezuela having been part of OPEC, but they haven't said a word. So you can see that where the world is moving towards, and this new policy of Donald Trump in terms of resuscitating the utilization of fossil fuels as a means of energy, and that's going to be used again to boost his economy, is very serious, and is going to ensure that it destroys whatever it is that has to do with the cutting down on the usage of fossil fuels, particularly oil, and is going to also ensure that the United States disengages and get out of all of these treaties that at least the administration before him, particularly that of Joe Biden, signed, including the Paris Accord. He's going to be getting out of those because those are the platforms that are seeking to disturb his economic policy and objectives in the United States.
And for me, I think, national interest versus self-interest, and whether it's fact-based. I mean, just these decisions that have been taken, has there been a formal assessment of the economic and environmental risks associated with exiting the climate treaty, for instance?
No, of course, this is all thumbs-up decisions. These are decisions that are made between him and his very close circles, including people such as Marco Rubio. They don't believe that there's anything called climate change. In fact, he's on record as saying that the world is cooling instead of warming up. So this is the man who really doesn't really care about what goes on and how his decisions are going to impact the world, for that matter. The fact that he went on to attack Venezuela, emboldening other countries that have got similar ambition, including China, is quite disturbing. But of course, his people don't see that as a possible negative impact towards their allies throughout the world. He's going to do as he wishes. So there's no policy, there's no rationale, there's no research that suggests that decisions that are currently made by Donald Trump are informed by research. These are purely transactional, pure capitalistic positions that are informed by him and his friends in terms of ensuring that he makes as much money as possible for himself, his family, and his friends before he leaves power.
So what does this do in terms of opening the door for greater influence by parties such as China or even the EU in terms of global leadership at large?
Well, China has always had this hands-off approach towards global challenges or making decisions that are going to be impacting on other nations. They're only concerned about themselves. We saw, for example, when Donald Trump came up with the tariffs, one would have expected that China, being one of the largest countries, at least within BRICS, they would have kind of closed ranks and tackled the imposition of tariffs by Donald Trump. But instead, China decided to act on its own, serving its own interest. So I don't expect China to really take a leading global role in terms of pushing back what Donald Trump is doing, China taking a leading role in terms of really benefiting the entire nation. They will piggyback on whatever multilateral platforms are there and agree with everybody else, but for them to stick their head out and lead in these challenging times, I don't think that's going to be happening. They're going to resort into doing what they've been doing all the years, which is serving their own interests, abstaining whenever necessary. If you look at the number of abstentions that China's had at the United Nations, whether it's Security Council or General Assembly, dozens, in fact, all the time. They've never taken a position that is always, or a position that's pro anything. They've always either abstained or taken a position that favors China. So I don't have any hopes that China is going to step in and push back what Donald Trump is currently advancing in terms of international relations and politics.
Just finally, one is wondering, what then would be the benchmarks, and are there any that are anticipated in terms of evaluating whether this withdrawal from these entities is successful or detrimental to the US over the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, it's going to be extremely impactful. We saw what, for example, happened when earlier on it decided to shut down US aid. Many countries started, and organizations started to feel the pinch because the United States has always been the major funder of these institutions and agencies. This is certainly going to impact. We still don't know yet. I've looked at the list. The list that's currently published largely has been affecting the UN agencies, but there's certainly other organizations as well outside the UN, multilateral platforms that were seeking to push back. By the way, this is not just about money. It's also about other smaller countries, particularly those that are aligned to the United States, following suit. If Donald Trump issues an instructions for them to do so, they are likely to do so. So this is another big blow towards or to the multilateral platforms and multilateralism. And I think by the end of his tenure, as I've said, in the next 36 months, the world would have been pushed back in terms of its achievements, and just general human achievement would have been pushed back, and we have to start afresh, unfortunately, when the dust settles.
Thank you for your time and insights, international relations and analyst and director of Africa-Asia Dialogues, Tsepiso Makwetla. Brings the time to 9:20.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi has now accused Rwanda of violating the peace deal. Are you surprised at this latest accusation? This is literally days after signing a ceremony, so to speak.
This is not surprising. I mean, if you ask Paul Kagame, he would also say almost the same thing. One should ask a question. The broker of the peace deal, President Trump, what is it that he wants? Why now? And why is this peace deal being signed in the Americas and not in the Great Lakes? Paul Kagame has never respected Tshisekedi, as often say. Tshisekedi must deal with the problems in his country. He has nothing to do with it. So this peace deal, obviously, when it was signed, one just looked at it and said, this will not last.
Kenny Matiba, former journalist.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
22 minutes past 9, you are listening to Africa World Hour. Israel's decision to formally recognize Somaliland as an independent state has drawn sharp condemnation from Somalia and the African Union. intensifying political tensions across the Horn of Africa. The announcement, reinforced by a recent meeting between Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar and Somaliland President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi, comes against the backdrop of an escalating rivalry over key Red Sea and Indian Ocean maritime routes and heightened security risks stemming from Houthi attacks on commercial shipping. The development has potential to realign regional dynamics involving Ethiopia, Egypt, Turkey and Eritrea. Channel Africa's Michael Mbawe has more.
Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar held talks with Somaliland President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi on his first visit to the breakaway region since Israel controversially recognized it as an independent country. In his remarks, Saar said Israel was determined to advance relations with Somaliland with momentum, while President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi hailed his visit as a big day. Last month, Israel became the first country in the world to recognize Somaliland, which declared independence from Somalia more than 30 years ago. Saar also addressed the backlash to Israel recognizing Somaliland as an independent state, saying the decision was not made against anyone and only Israel will determine for itself who it recognizes.
Nobody will determine for Israel who we recognize, Mr. President. Israel is truly honored to be the first UN member state to recognize the Republic of Somaliland as an independent and sovereign state. This is the moral thing to do. And this is what we did. We hear the attacks, the criticism, the condemnations. Nobody will determine for Israel who we recognize and who we maintain diplomatic relation with. We agreed on the mutual appointment of ambassadors and the opening of embassies. We will get that done soon.
Somaliland President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi responded with words of cooperation, reaffirming its ties with Israel.
An evolving relationship between the Republic of Somaliland and the State of Israel. It reflects not only political recognition, but also a shared commitment to transform that recognition into a substantive, forward-looking and strategic partnership. We see this partnership not as a symbolic, but as practical, institutional, and result-oriented, one that contributes to stability, prosperity, and shared interest.
But Somalia sees Somaliland as being part of its territory and condemned Saar's visit as unacceptable interference in its affairs. Speaking to Channel Africa, Somalia Ambassador to South Africa, Mohammed Sheikh, responded.
The federal government of Somalia reaffirms its non-negotiable commitment to its sovereignty, national unity and territorial integrity as enshrined in the provisional constitution of the Federal Republic of Somalia, the Charter of the United States and the Constitutive Act of the African Union and territorial integrity. Unlawful steps by Israel proposing to recognize the northern region of Somalia, so-called Somaliland region, is an integral party and inseparable party of the sovereign territory of Federal Republic of Somalia. The federal government underscored that Somalia is a single, invisible sovereign state and no external as authorities or standing to alter its unity or territorial configuration, any declaration, recognition or arrangement.
He called on all states to respect and uphold international law as enshrined in the UN Charter and warned that Somalia would not tolerate the establishment of any foreign military bases in its immediate region.
Federal Republic of Somalia calls upon all states and international parties to respect international law, uphold principle of non-interference and territorial integrity and act responsibility in the interest of peace, stability and security in the Horn of Africa. Somalia makes clear that it will not permit the establishment of any military bases or arrangement on its territory that will draw Somalia into a proxy conflict or import regional and international hostilities into this region. So the Federal Republic of Somalia warns that illegitimate action of this nature seriously undermine regional peace and stability exacerbate political and security tension in the Horn of Africa, the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden and the Middle East and also wider region.
He also confirmed AU's solidarity with Somalia while commending South Africa for extending further its olive branch to the Somalian question.
The African Union has already taken several actions and condemned it in the beginning, and also yesterday held a ministerial meeting for the Member State of Peace and Security Commission, and there was a strong statement yesterday. Somalia has already seen its solidarity from African Union, and it is a member state to uphold international law and safeguard the principle of territorial integrity on the continent. Finally, for this occasion, I want to thank, on behalf of the government and people of Somalia, I wish to convey our sincere appreciation to the government and people of South Africa for its solidarity and the principal statement.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
The United States is tightening its visitor visa rules from January 21. Applicants from 38 countries seeking tourist or business visas may be required to post a refundable security bond of between $5,000 and $15,000 The State Department says the decision on bond amount will be made by consular officers during visa interviews. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has the details.
According to information published on the State Department's website, posting a bond does not guarantee that a visa will be issued. Applicants instructed to pay without approval from a consular officer will not receive a refund. Caroline Leviat is the White House press secretary.
Trump administration has done more to limit migration, both illegal and legal, than any administration in history. And I'll just walk you through some of the actions that we have taken thus far. Number one, the Trump administration issued a travel ban for 19 countries, including Afghanistan. Special immigrant visas, which is a legal pathway to get here, which we know many Afghans have utilized to come into the country, have now been paused since the tragic shooting last week. Refugee admissions were suspended for Afghans from this administration on day one, and refugee admissions into the country right now are essentially at zero, with the exception of Afrikaners fleeing persecution in South Africa.
I spoke to Professor Lauren Landau, a senior researcher at Wits University's African School for Migration and Society. I asked him whether visa bonds of up to $15,000 actually reduce overstays or whether they merely shut out legitimate travelers from poor countries. Here's what he had to say.
Will $15,000 visa bond block people from coming? It won't stop the undocumented migrants, the overstayers, the others who come in without a real program for how to stay. Those people are already coming in under the table without documents, coming in under other mechanisms. It might block a few of them, it might block some that come in on tourist visas, but what it will do is block students, business people, highly skilled people who could make an enormous contribution to the United States. So what are we doing? Are we going to stop migration? No. Are we going to stop highly skilled and useful migration? Probably.
Professor Landau says the policy is unlikely to have a significant impact on tourism, business travel, or people-to-people ties with Africa and other affected regions.
The diplomatic implications of these measures, together with everything else that the administration have said, are severe. But they will be felt in the short term more from the African side because the United States administration is not interested in good relations. They don't have a interest or an ability to foresee what are the country's long-term interests, whether that is with Africa or whether it is with its long-term allies. These policies are meant to isolate the United States from any external influence while preserving its access to their resources, to their money, to U.S. power. And I think that will happen in the short term, but in the long term, this will undermine not only African countries, who may find ways of becoming more independent away from the United States, but it will definitely hurt in the long term the U.S. interests.
He adds that, in his view, the United States is not particularly concerned about how such measures affect African citizens.
These kind of policies will have enormous impacts. Not so much on tourism. African tourism to the United States is low. Will it block business travel? Potentially. Although I think in this era of digital communication, actual travel is perhaps less important, but it will have enormous implications for partnerships, for the brand, and for the willingness to engage with the United States. The United States, at least its leadership, is not interested in Africa, is not interested in the people of Africa. It may be interested in the resources, the material resources that Africa has to offer. But for those to come to the United States, doesn't require a single African to be involved.
As debates grow over the fairness and effectiveness of the policy, questions remain about the broader impact on U.S. relations with countries now facing this stricter visa requirements. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Simosa in Mpumalanga, South Africa.
27 minutes to 10, we go back to that story about Journalists Accreditation Board, the JAB in Tanzania, saying about 4,000 journalists have registered to get licenses. The East African nation this week announced plans to crack down on journalists and media outlets operating without accreditation. The JAB says it has learned of a growing number that could lead to targeting outlets critical of government. To Dongobeni compiled this report.
The Journalists Accreditation Board, JAB, in Tanzania was launched in March last year, hailed by officials as a turning point for the country's journalism industry. Established in 2024 after amendments to the Media Services Act was mandated to ensure journalists are licensed to write, film, edit and produce their work for publication. The act also empowered authorities to suspend the licenses of media outlets that violate the law. The board announced this week that it would come after those unlicensed journalists, as it has learned of some people who do not meet requirements but have embarked on duties of journalism after the end of the general election. Acting Director of the board, Advocate Patrick Kipangula, says the JAB is an independent body which seeks to professionalize the sector.
Its establishment addresses long-standing challenge in the media sector, including the absence of clear professional standard, the infiltration of unqualified individuals into journalism practice, and the decline of public trust in the media content. The body operates as an independent institution, our independent statutory body, with the mandate to professionalize journalism, safeguard ethical conduct.
Kipangula says the law states clearly that anyone practicing journalism in the country without accreditation is committing an offense punishable by law.
And if you read Section 19 of the Media Services Act, stipulates clearly that if any person wants to practice journalism in Tanzania, must be registered and must be by the board. So practicing journalism in Tanzania here without accreditation is not legally recognized. So if we read also Section 50, subsection 2B of the Media Services Act, stipulates clearly also that practicing journalism in Tanzania without accreditation is an offense, and the offense is punishable by the law.
He says almost 4,000 journalists have already registered on their system and therefore are allowed to practice journalism in the country, with those who are practicing without qualifications given a grace period to obtain the formal qualifications.
Currently, we have 3,700 journalists who are already registered in our registration system, and these journalists are allowed to practice journalism in Tanzania without any obstacle. We have few practice without accreditation. That's why we are reminding them to make sure that they register to meet the qualification of the law and practice journalism without any problem. Also, it should be noted that under Section 67 of the Media Services Act is a transitional provision. This transitional provision introduced a 5-year arrangement to give individuals who were already practicing journalism but did not meet the minimum academic qualification, to give them adequate time to upgrade their skills through formal education.
Kipangula says there has been a marked improvement in ethical journalism in the country since the establishment of the board.
There has been measurable progress in ethical journalism since the establishment and the operationalization of the board. One of the improvement it is increased awareness and application of the Journalists' Code of Ethics.
Meanwhile, critics argue that the interpretation of what is lawful remains in the hands of regulators, enabling them to target outlets critical of government. William Bird, director of Moxie Africa, a media monitoring organization, says the licensing will hinder journalists in Tanzania from expressing their views freely, as it cannot be seen as a tool to ensure good quality journalism.
I think we've known for some time that the situation in Tanzania is unfortunately profoundly negative, especially for journalists. The limitations on media freedom and on journalists' ability to practice their basic craft is severely limited, and this idea and notion of needing to license is fundamentally at odds with the ability for people to freely express their views and share their diverse opinions. It cannot be seen as a legitimate mechanism to ensure good quality journalism. Rather, this is seen as a measure to limit and ensure that only those that are approved by certain people will be allowed to tell their stories. So we need to condemn this in the strongest possible manner.
For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongobeni in Johannesburg.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio.
And this is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. I'm Tsepiso Makwetla. Thanks for joining us. If you've just done so, we continue with some of the major developments across the continent and beyond. Officials are continuing investigations after a group of 20 children were intercepted while attempting to cross South Africa's Limpopo River in the direction of Zimbabwe. The operation was carried out by members of the South African National Defence Force and Border Management Authority near the Beitbridge border post between the two countries. Officials say the majority of the minors were found without parental supervision or legal guardianship, with only one adult confirmed to be the parent of some of the children. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Deputy Commissioner for Operations in the BMA, General David Chilembe. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, General.
Good evening, yes, I am here. My name is David Chilembe, the Deputy Commissioner in the BMA, responsible for operations.
Well, let's just start there about the specific operation that led to the discovery. What was its purpose and how was it carried out?
In terms of our plan, we planned last year that we will have an exit leg, and the second leg would be when people are coming back from the holidays. So we have planned in such a way that all the movements of people at the port and in the vulnerable segments of the borders, we will be able to do the monitoring in those spaces. So we have brought in technology, for example, the issues of drones that we are using to monitor the other areas, or what we call the vulnerable areas that are outside the port of entry. And the 10-kilometer radius. And we're also working with the other role players, the defense, the police, and the other border control components in that space.
Now, just in terms of what you know about the children and how they came to be traveling unaccompanied and where they were going, what can you tell us about that?
The 20 children that we encountered with this morning at about 10 o'clock, they were en route to Zimbabwe from South Africa. They were accompanied by about 10 adults. So what happened is that they were dropped on the N1 just towards the border, and they were picked up by our drones, where they were then led to the vulnerable segment of the borderline in an attempt to take them back to Zimbabwe.
And what specific protocols are then triggered the moment an unsupervised minor is intercepted at a land border post like Beitbridge?
We have a procedure manual that talks to how we deal with unaccompanied children. This is something that we do at the declared port of entry and also in the space where we are functioning as the border management. Just to mention some of the issues that we do, that whenever there are children that are unaccompanied or that goes with their parents, they have to have the necessary documents, the unabridged certificate, and all those issues. But in this case, the children did not have passports, but they were accompanied by those adults that we found them with, trying to cross the border. Then what we have done is that because of the issues of children, we then involve the Department of Social Development in order to deal with those issues.
And I'm just wondering, in this case, what criteria do BMA officials then use to distinguish between human trafficking, smuggling, and informal family reunification?
Yeah, there are various issues or categories of way of how we deal with these issues. For example, if we find children, like as I've mentioned, that we will be in touch with the Department of Social Development, who then do the interview on with those children, and also we involve our immigration officials, who then do what we call the citizenship verification. After all that has been done, we then hand over whoever that we have dealt with to our counterparts. In this case, we hand them over to the Zimbabweans. The Zimbabweans will also do the same process in order to prevent that we don't send children or people who are not supposed to be Zimbabweans. So the process is done by both countries. We do our side, we then hand over to the Zimbabweans. After they have confirmed that the children are real Zimbabweans, then they will then take over the process from their side.
But just also, beyond a valid passport, are there secondary documentations that are strictly required for an unaccompanied minor to cross legally? And are there also emergency dispensations that can be put in place?
In issues of borders, the only document that is required is a passport, because there's no other document that can allow a person to move between two countries, unless if the person in question has been arrested or has been handed over by the authorities. It will depend that maybe the person is being deported or repatriated. Then there will be some specific documents that we use in that case. But mainly, the document that is used is a passport. Hence, we are saying if children, specifically South African children, when they leave the country with their parents, they must have what we call the unabridged certificate.
But now, in this case, after these minors were found to be unaccompanied by their legal guardians or parents, once intercepted, which department takes immediate physical custody of the minors to ensure their safety and psychological well-being?
It depends. If they are found by BMA or police or defense, we then hand over them to the Department of Social Development, who then deals, who has the qualification to deal with issues of children.
And just to also get clarity on what formal agreements exist between the BMA or the South African government, just with regards to Zimbabwe's child welfare authorities, to ensure that they are safely repatriated and not simply pushed back across the border.
South Africa has bilateral relation with Zimbabwe. We deal with Zimbabwe on a binational commission that is chaired by both presidents, and in those commissions there are committees that are related to certain functions. Maybe in this case, the immigration work. Then there will be a committee that will be chaired by both Zimbabwe and South Africa that deals with the issues of immigration.
Mm-hmm. But also, how does the BMA or South African authorities verify the identities of parents or guardians claiming the children after an interception, in that procedure that you have to reunite them with their legal guardians? And is it documentation that is sought from residents in South Africa?
Yes, like as I said earlier, that there are interviews that are being conducted. We bring in specialists, the Department of Social Development, who are qualified to deal with the issues of children. But if it is normal people, we then do what we call citizenship verification. That is done by the officials of the BMA who are appointed as immigration officers. They have qualification in terms of the interviews that they conduct in order to establish whether a person is a South African or not.
And in this operation, was it the deployment of drone technology to ensure the success and safety of intercepting the miners in that remote bush area we believe that they were found?
Come again, I didn't hear the question.
I'm asking if there was the deployment of drone technology in...
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's not only the deployment of drone technology. The Minister of Defense and other ministers and the portfolio committees, when we were presenting our plan for the festive season, they also visited the ports, and we showed them that what is it that we doing in those areas. So specifically, the Minister of Defense agreed that BMA and the defense must have a reaction team that will be deployed in those vulnerable segments. And we even also reached out to some companies that have got vehicles with the capability to work in that area, where we were looking at that how can we use this vehicle. In this case, for example, we've been using a vehicle, an amphibian vehicle called Shipper. This vehicle has got the capability of going through the river, whereby we were able to cut all those ropes that the illegal people were using as boats to carry people from South Africa to Zimbabwe or vice versa, and also that included the transportation of illegal goods.
All right, thank you so much for your time and bring us up to speed on that major story in South Africa, and that is the discovery of unaccompanied minors by Bridge Border Post. That's the Deputy Commissioner of Operations in the BMA, General David Chilembe. That brings the time to 9 minutes to 10. Shaylin Kumana joining us in the studio to tell us what's happening on African Diaries this evening.
Oh, ma'am, how are we?
I look as I sound.
No, I don't think so. I think the look is fine. The sounding is what I'm most concerned about.
Oh, yeah, ne?
But we're gonna get better, right?
Yeah, and also, people just also don't get it. Like, to operate in the environment that we do, you actually just need optimum facilities. Like today, all of a sudden, there's this aircon that is just hitting me right in the sinus, and I've already have my own flu cold problems.
Sorry about that, ma'am. Perhaps what I'm about to share might cheer you up. It's a Thursday and we're looking at sport trends. So in the first hour, we touch base with Mthokozisi Dube, who is the editor of Far Post, getting the latest in AFCON. Still in the first hour of the show, we travel to Cape Town for the Lomarans King's Plate. It's an annual Grade 1 horse race. that I'm now learning about. I know that they want to go bigger and better. They want to make it international. So quite a few changes are coming into context. I'm excited about that. And we're going to be speaking to Alistair Cohen about that. And then in the last hour, again, youngsters who are proving me wrong, okay, about life. We're going to be speaking to Gift Motlotsi, who is a 17-year-old behind a tech company that's doing amazing things. Tech company, 17. I am rethinking everything, and not for the context of me at 17, but me at now. What am I utilizing the tech I have access to at this very stage? Don't you think?
What are we doing with our lives? Like we said the other day, like people are living. But you know, when you talk about this Lomarans horse race, I was just speaking to my cousin the other day, and he was telling me that they did a wine farm visit to Spear. I was thinking, in all my travel to Cape Town, do you know that I've never done a wine estate visit? I've been to the Strandloop and I loved it. But and that's, by the way, around wine country. But I was thinking, how come I've just never done that?
Well,
anybody
now you
who's
get to
listening
do it.
with a plan,
Got it.
putting it out there, just
Hit
putting
me
it out.
up.
Just take me to a wine farm.
Come on, would be lovely though.
Oh yeah,
It
and
would
now
be
I
lovely.
especially love the idea of the different pairings of food with the wine.
I'm going to be honest. I don't necessarily always agree with the pairing.
Not true. It's like, have you ever been my first champagne tasting?
Okay.
I'm laughing because it got so bad.
Yeah.
I was still working for Prime Media at the time.
Mm.
And I remember Sam Khan and I was like, come Tips, let's go. Hey, boo.
It's the
I know you're supposed to spit it out, but how do you spit out good champagne?
Just let it go.
Needless to say, within 30 minutes, we were actually the last to leave, and the organizers had then decided to bring all the champagne bottles. It was done. Like, right, now let's finish this. I've never been champagne tasting ever since.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't either.
No,
I would not.
So suppose the objective, when you talk about the pairing, I get it in the sense that you just have to enjoy what you're drinking.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think that some wines are a tad too heavy for the food you're saying we should pair it with.
Yeah, it's like red wine, guys. For me,
where must you take the taste? It's heavy. It's stodgy on the mouth. I'm okay. It's okay.
Yeah, that's why I'm a white wine girl,
Yes, ma'am.
because I feel like it's just smoother. And yes, they're beautiful red wines, but it's a lot. Eh?
It is. At this point, we must just start a wine show management. You had it right here. That's what comes up on the show today.
All right, thanks, Shayda. 5 minutes to 10 now. Let's end with this. South Africa's National Consumer Commission issuing a recall of specific batch of NAN Special Pro HA infant formula sold in South Africa, Namibia and Eswatini. The recall follows concerns over the potential presence of a toxin linked to Bacillus cereus, raising food safety concerns of infants. Nestle and the regulators say the move is precautionary with no confirmed cases of illness reported so far. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabang reports.
The recall of some batches of infant nutrition products has widened beyond Europe to Africa, the Americas and Asia, including Brazil, China and South Africa. The National Consumer Commission in South Africa says the recall follows routine quality checks conducted by the manufacturer abroad. Peton Taba, spokesperson and media relations manager for the National Consumer Commission, explains how the contamination was detected.
Producers and manufacturers of products throughout the world are actually required to do routine checks to ensure that products they produce do comply with various laws throughout the world. So this contamination was detected in Europe, according to Nestle. where when they were doing their traceability, they then identified some products or some batches in the Republic of South Africa, Namibia, as well as Eswatini. So they then followed the NCC's product recall protocols.
Nestle says only one batch of the infant formula was affected locally and that most of the stock never reached consumers. Connie Sitailo, Nestle Director for Corporate Communications and Public Affairs in the East and Southern Africa region, outlines the scope of the recall.
For us as South Africa, the quantities are quite limited because most of them were still within our control. So we have one specific batch that was imported from one of the affected factories or affected countries. However, we are well in control of that, and we have also notified the relevant authorities to help us make sure that we retrieve everything that is out there that we don't have, which is quite limited and minimal. Products were manufactured on the 15th